Last month, I was challenged to build the most annoying PC as I possibly could. And so I scoured the web for the loudest hard drive, the most annoying GPU, and a power supply whose every single review on Amazon says something about how loud it is. But worst of all is I have these 3D printed fan modifications that apparently are so ear-piercing that even a single one of them could give you tinnitus. And we have multiple of them. And to house it all together, I'll be using APNX's brand new V1 case, which drops today. And at the end of the video, I'll let you know my overall thoughts, assuming of course that I still have eardrums from all of these loud, annoying components. So let's start by seeing how loud each of these are individually. Starting off with the loudest GPU. If you Google what's the loudest graphics card, this is what pops up. It's an R9 290X reference card, and it is a blower, as you can see, which has a tendency to be a bit louder than its counterpart. But how loud is it actually? Well, if we go ahead and toss it into our test bench, honestly, it's not as loud as I thought it was going to be based on those comments. But that said, we have not fully put it under load and, well, you know, we have a lot more to figure out. Now, hard drives have spinning disks, and those spinning disks can create vibrations and noise. And this is a WD Velociraptor, which has 10,000 RPM, which is nuts, and leads to sounds like this when turned on. I could see this driving me crazy, but it's not nearly as bad as the power supply. This is the infamous Senkato 1600 watt power supply. And if you're wondering why it's infamous, well, okay. And for the coup de grace, we have these fan modifications, which I'll get to in a little bit. Oh my gosh, this is gonna be the most annoying PC ever. But let's go ahead and throw this all into our PC case, which again is the brand new APNX V1. And this thing, quite honestly, will save our build because it's gonna make it look good, even if it sounds awful. With the front and back and the top panels removed, you can get a better sense of the intended airflow. You can see it's almost an L shape as it comes in here and then turns around this corner to go over the components. This is a dual chamber design, meaning that power supply and everything back here are kind of like hidden away from the airflow to maximize the cooling for like the main components. And it definitely makes for an interesting looking case as well. I know it's not the very first of its kind to have this kind of cutoff corner. In fact, I know NZXT also makes a case, and actually I have it right here, where they have that cutoff corner as well. But the thing to notice is the size of this intake. So here, this is roughly the size of that intake. To compare it against over here, well, it's quite a bit smaller, meaning the amount of space that this APNX V1 has over that other design is, well, like almost 1.5 times as much. Should lead to better airflow on paper and more air for our sirens to consume. Since we're using an R9 290X, which came out like over a decade ago, it only feels right to use a motherboard and CPU combination that is also kind of dated. And well, thankfully, our test bench here, I believe is an 1151 socket, and well, the colors match up perfectly to this GPU. So I'm contemplating literally just using this inside of our case, because hey, it looks nice. That said, I don't have an IO shield for this motherboard, so just pretend like there's one there, okay? And speaking of the 290X, it's time to throw in our blower style super loud card. Personally, I think coil whine is a lot more annoying than like a loud blower fan, but this power color R9, well, this fits nicely into our case, just like that, easy peasy. This case also has a GP support bracket pre-installed, which is nice for cards being super bulky these days. So we can just slide that to adjust it. Does this R9 need it? Probably not, but hey, it's there, so might as well use it. Now, you might be wondering where our super loud 10,000 RPM hard drive is going to go inside of this case. And well, check this out. If we remove these two screws, this piece actually swings open, revealing exactly where we can fit some hard drives and SSDs. That is such a neat, I don't think I've ever seen this before in a case. And so we can go ahead and secure our hard drive just like that. This thing's really cool. I always find magnets so satisfying. All right, up next, our power supply, our jet engine, if you will. I legitimately cannot believe this thing is as loud as it is. There's no reason for the fan to be spinning that fast inside of this thing. This thing by itself would drive me absolutely bonkers. But taking advantage of the dual chamber design in this case, well, we should be able to slot this right in. And honestly, there's a lot of room back here for cable management. And you know, I suck at cable management, but honestly, I'm not sweating not being able to fit all this stuff in here. So this is great. Tons of channels in the right spot for cable management. There's also like on the bottom here, there's this angled piece of metal that points upwards and kind of like deflects the cables when you push it through, which is nice because those cables are always going to go upwards towards the bottom of the motherboard. They're never going to go downwards towards the fans. So nice little design choice that they made right there. All right. So with the cable management completed, it's time for the biggest task of the night, which is installing our case fan modifications. So this again is a 3D printed fan modification specifically for Noctua fans that was, well, first presented by Major Hardware, who has this really fun series where he gets his audience members to 3D print different blade designs for fans and then tests them out in terms of performance and noise. So this one came about from a viewer, which I'll leave some information in like the STL file in case you want to print it down below. But this one came about in a challenge to make the loudest and most annoying fan as possible. And now this is a destructive mod, so if you don't like seeing PC parts destroyed, well, too late, sorry about that. So for this one, basically we need to remove the brown fan blades from the actual fan. And so I found the best way was to use a soldering iron to melt the plastic and then use a screwdriver to kind of pry it off completely. And with that, we have that metal spinning middle part exposed and we can push down our middle fan blade. And the way this works is that there's a bunch of channels that kind of push air outwards to the sides when it spins around. And then there is basically this cover that goes on top of it, this like square piece. Although I printed mine a little too small because there's no clearance. And so I'd use a bit of Vaseline to help lubricate it. And so it made the most sense to me to put one of these siren fan modifications in the back here because it is an exhaust. But now I'm trying to figure out where another one should go. The front of the case is a little awkward because it wants to be an intake fan, but then you have this extra, plastic piece sticking out of it, so it doesn't really fit. So what I decided was at the top is also an exhaust, so we could go ahead and put this kind of right in the middle. That could work. Now, as you can see, this case doesn't come with any pre-installed fans, but APNX does make their own fan. This is the FP1. You can see it's actually a bit thicker than a common fan, and it has these rounded edges, which is pretty nice. Bonus quiz time. In 10 seconds, can you find the difference between these two fans? They're both APNX, they're both FP1. However, if you look very closely on the right, these fins are, concave pointed downwards, and these ones are concave pointed upwards, meaning that air flows directionally this way on this fan, but it actually gets pulled this way on this fan, despite the blades both being exposed. And that's because this is a reverse. It's an FP1 reverse, meaning you can use it at, say, like the bottom of your case as an intake fan, but you can still see the exposed RGB fins. That honestly is really cool. And I wish these were included with the case, but unfortunately it's not. But let's go ahead and install some of those. We'll take one last look at my final attempt to cable manage this, which is not pretty, but it is functional. And then we'll go ahead and reassemble all of the panels, which are all toolless, meaning that you don't need to rely on a screwdriver or screws to hold it together, which I love. So now it's time to find out what happens if we combine the loudest rated power supply, plus the loudest rated blower style GPU, plus the loudest hard drive, plus these fan modifications that turn our fans into quite literal sirens. What happens when we throw them all together? Well, if we turn on our power supply, it's time to find out. The sound meter picked up consistently over 90 decibels and topped out at 110, which if we look at the Know Your Noise chart, that's in between a helicopter and a police siren, constantly inside of your PC room. Far too loud and most certainly dangerous to listen to for long periods of time. Despite how loud these components were, assembling it was a breeze inside of this APNX V1, which, listen to me, these are cases built by people who know cases. There are so many little design choices that you won't appreciate until you get your hands dirty with this case. For example, on the back here, you might think this is just an aesthetic bracket that they included to show off APNX, which is half true, but it's also more functional than that as well. You see, the case allows for two different standoff positions for an ATX motherboard, one maybe an inch or so higher than the other. And that's there so you can decide whether you want the main airflow from, the dual chamber to prioritize your GPU or your CPU. That small little adjustment does impact thermals, although I haven't fully tested it myself to say by how much. But even the fact that it allows you to target different components with air is super interesting. And then the bracket comes into play because, well, if you have it a little lower, you need that extra space to cover the casing. So it's versatile, but also aesthetic. And speaking of versatility, you can fit a 360mm radiator in 3 different orientations inside of this case, which is pretty cool. At the bottom, at the top, or at the 45-degree angle. Like I said, this case is launching today with an MSRP between, I think, $120 and $140. I'll leave the actual product link down below in case you want to learn more. But know that aesthetic-wise, you do have a few choices. The case does come in white, black, as well as a mix of white and black. And this accent cover here also comes in variations. You can have white, black, as well as a wooden finish. And so mixing and matching all of those, I believe, is an option. APNX also does offer a vertical GPU kit for this case as well, which is a nice option to have given this kind of panoramic glass view of the case. Personally, I think running cables in this case was a lot easier than expected, with the back feeling like it had a lot more space. Maybe this case is a bit deeper than what I'm used to, and and I did like that. Overall, I think APNX is knocking it out of the park when it comes to these cases. This is only their second case, but clearly this is built by people who really care about cases. But with that, that's all I have for you today. So I apologize for your ears, but I thank you for watching. A big thank you to APNX for sending out this case for me to tinker with. And well, as always, I've been Mr. Yeaster, your tech tinkerer. I will catch you in the next one. Oh yeah.